Have you ever felt like life is stacked against you? Like no matter how hard you try, things just don't go your way? What if I told you about a man who went from having nothing, not even a home, to building $1 million company, all while raising his young son? This is the incredible, true story of Chris Gardner, the man behind The Pursuit of Happyness. And yes, the misspelling of happiness in that title was intentional. Chris Gardner was born on February 9, 1954, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But his early life was far from a fairy tale. He grew up in a household plagued by poverty, domestic violence, alcoholism, and instability. His stepfather was abusive and frequently targeted Chris, saying, "You ain't never gonna be nothing." Chris's biological father was absent, and his mother, though loving and encouraging, was in and out of prison. At just 8 years old, Chris witnessed his mother being arrested and dragged away by the police. That moment left a scar on his soul and a fire in his heart. He was sent to foster care, separated from his siblings, and left to grow up among strangers. But despite the instability, Chris always believed that he was meant for more. He clung to a vision of a better life, a life far beyond the darkness that surrounded him. Chris eventually enlisted in the U.S. Navy, hoping it would offer some structure and purpose. He served honorably and was stationed in North Carolina, where he met Dr. Robert Ellis, a leading cardiac surgeon. This relationship sparked Chris's initial interest in medicine. After the Navy, he moved to San Francisco and began working as a medical equipment salesman. He was good at it, persuasive, personable, and ambitious. But the job didn't pay well, and he struggled to make ends meet. It was around this time he became a father. His relationship with his son's mother deteriorated, and she eventually left him, leaving their toddler, Christopher Jr., in his care. Suddenly, Chris was not just fighting for his own future, he was responsible for another life. As bills piled up and money ran out, Chris found himself evicted from his apartment. With nowhere to go, he and his son slept in public restrooms, train stations, parks, and sometimes shelters if they were lucky. Imagine trying to study for a finance exam while holding your son on your lap in a subway station. Imagine going to work every day in a suit you can't afford to clean, smiling through exhaustion and fear, just to hold onto a dream. But Chris refused to give up. He once said, "The cavalry ain't coming. You've got to do this yourself." One day, while walking in San Francisco, Chris saw a well-dressed man stepping out of a red Ferrari. He asked him, "What do you do for a living?" The man replied, "I'm a stockbroker." That one answer changed everything. Chris decided then and there he was going to become a stockbroker, no matter what it took. He applied to every brokerage firm he could find, often with no response. But eventually, Dean Witter Reynolds offered him an unpaid internship. An unpaid internship, with no guarantee of a job, while he was homeless, while he had a child to feed. Still, Chris said yes, and he committed harder than anyone else. He arrived early, stayed late, made more calls, studied harder, smiled wider, slept less. Despite all odds, Chris Gardner passed the Series 7 exam, a major milestone in the finance industry. He was offered a full-time position at Dean Witter. He went from sleeping in subway bathrooms to working in one of the most prestigious firms on Wall Street. And he didn't stop there. In 1987, Chris Gardner founded his own brokerage firm, Gardner Rich & Company, in Chicago. With just $10,000 in capital and a small apartment, he built his empire. Within a few years, he became a multimillionaire. But more than that, he became a symbol. Chris's story eventually caught the attention of Hollywood. In 2006, his autobiography was turned into a major motion picture, The Pursuit of Happyness, starring Will Smith. The film was a massive success, not because of flashy scenes or fantasy, but because it was real. It was the story of a man who refused to quit. A man who didn't wait for rescue. A man who took a shattered life and rebuilt it one decision at a time. Chris Gardner's journey teaches us that you don't need permission to succeed. Your past does not define your future. Rejection is not the end. It's the beginning of redirection. If you have a why, you can survive almost anyhow. And most of all, happiness is not given. It's pursued. Let's end with some of Chris Gardner's most powerful quotes. You got a dream? You gotta protect it. Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. The future was uncertain, absolutely. And there were many hurdles, twists, and turns to come. But as long as I kept moving forward, one foot in front of the other, the voice of fear and shame would be stilled. Let's end with some of Chris Gardner's most powerful quotes. You got a dream? You gotta protect it. Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. The future was uncertain, absolutely, and there were many hurdles, twists, and turns to come. But as long as I kept moving forward, one foot in front of the other, the voice of fear and shame would be stilled. Chris Gardner's life is proof that sometimes the lowest point becomes the turning point. From janitor to millionaire. From sleeping in bathrooms to shaking hands with CEOs. From being invisible to becoming an inspiration. So, when life pushes you down, when doors close in your face, when the world says you can't, look in the mirror and say, watch me. This was the story of Chris Gardner. And this is Beyond Failure. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs it. See you in the next story.